However, now there's really not a lot of water. It's the bottom of the ocean. It's muddy, but there's still water all around. And Mashiach is not going to come until all the water from that ocean is taken out. So we have to go into the bottom of the ocean and slowly take out with small little shovels, and then we move down to small little syringes, and we suck out and we pull out a little bit of water. And each one of us is making sure that that ocean will be empty and dry, because Mashiach is not coming until the ocean is dry. So yes, we're not taking out the gallons and the hundreds of gallons of the dairis before us, but they weren't matzliach to dry the ocean yet. We are the generation that on the one hand, we're in the mud, we're in the bottom of the ocean in the mud. They probably came to work with their Shabbos clothing. They didn't get dirty taking out the water. We sometimes have to get dirty taking out the water. But we're there with our syringes, and slowly, I really believe that each one of us, without a suffix in my mind, each one of us are actually, with every extra maisa and every extra nisayon that we are oimed by, we are bringing Mashiach without a suffix. We have the ability to bring Mashiach. We have to understand that maybe we're in the mud, maybe we're not taking out gallons, but we are going to make this ocean dry, and Mashiach will come. Be'ezus Hashem b'mheira v'yamein. The subject I want to talk about tonight is, as we said, there's an organization that was opened a few months ago by Mrs. Peah called Al Pi Darkei, which is introducing ideas that in other parts of the world are much more known, right? There are interesting videos surfacing of ways of dealing with children who are struggling with Torah and mitzvahs. Baruch Hashem, here in Mexico, like everything else in many good ways and bad ways, we're behind. And Baruch Hashem, in this sense, we're behind as well. In other communities in Klal Yisrael, it's a magefa. It's mamish mugder ka magefa. Without mentioning names of cities, but kol city kedosha in any country, it's a magefa. And now there are surfacing all different interesting psakim of Gedolei Yisrael, it seems, of how to deal with it, that some people are strange to them. For an example, there's a video going around of a Gertzulin Ingles-Bridging that someone came to him and said he has a child who is going off the derech, and he's living at home and he has other children, and he just can't see. He sees him ruining the chinuch of all his other children. And he's asking him if it's the right thing for him to tell his child to leave the home. Said Rabbi Gertzulin Ingles-Bridging, it's definitely a problem, I hear. So let's take your other children and put them out by other family that can have them for a few months and leave this child at home. There's something called in America, it's called something called twisted parenting. It was founded by someone, Reb Avi Fishoff, a very, very special human being, a very special person who is moiser, gufay v'nafshay, to help parents. He also has very interesting, seemingly interesting, out-of-the-box psakim of how to deal with these children. And many people raise their eyebrows and want to understand what's going on. That's one thing I'd like to address, and the main thing I'd like to address throughout this three-class series. But the way I'd like to explain it is actually by dealing with the foundations of what chinuch is, which is relevant to any parent in any situation. And I want to start from scratch. I want to start on what seems to be the aleph beis of chinuch and what are parents looking for. Parents go around as they start having children. They look for chinuch classes. Many times you go to classes or you read books, and what you're learning is you're trying to learn as a parent, what am I supposed to do? How do I set boundaries? If and when do I punish? How do I punish? How do I reward? How do I give an incentive? And they'll teach you how to be an example, how not to show them contradictions. There are books and books and books and very chashuv, important books about this. Most of those things, when we're doing that, actually, we're putting an emphasis on the parent. What do I have to do as a parent to be machanech my child? What I want to try to do tonight is change the focus. And I'll explain. First, let's go back to general chinuch. The general way of thinking, what am I supposed to do as a parent? We have to know, and all of us do know this, that after all the classes, there's a famous Rabbi Yisrael Salanter I once saw, that Rabbi Leib Gerwitz brings down, that he heard Rabbi Yisrael Salanter in his name that said that at the end of the Torah, after the words La'einei Kol Yisrael, you just have to just say one more thing. You have to have seichel. He said it in Polish. I don't know the words exactly. But you have to have seichel. Now that's something that we all have to understand, that after all the rules that we're going to be hearing, a person has to have seichel. You have to adjust things according to the situation. But then there's a question some people want to ask me. What happens if I don't have seichel? Not a nice question. But, some people have more, some people have less. So then what am I supposed to do? Might be a funny question, but I think it's a true question. And this brings me to a very interesting question that's been bothering me the last few years. I don't know if it's a real question. I believe it's a philosophical question. It can be asked in many ways. How is it possible that the whole system, you can call the system of humanity, I have a question on the system of humanity that seems to be rigged against us. I'll explain to you what I mean. We all have a mitzvah. Every Yid has a mitzvah of pruvu. We have to have children. Lasheves, pruvu. There's a chiyuv to have children. We're all supposed to have children. We all have the ability to have children, Be'ezus Hashem. What's the most difficult problem that we all have in human relationships between one another? The most difficult thing that we have to deal with is our midas. When our midas are not mitukan, when our midas are not proper, we have problems with ben adam l'chaveiro. Now, let me ask you, do most people, are they mitukan? Are they good? Do they have perfect midas? Or do most people struggle with their midas? think it's clear to say a majority, and I think a very large majority of humanity struggles with their midas. Let me add something. Having a good relationship with your child, just having a good human relationship with your child. Does that take midas? Absolutely. There's midas at home as well. Dealing with children, if it's not a healthy relationship, you do damage to the child. A non-healthy relationship between a parent and a child clearly does damage to the child. That's unquestionable. We don't have to prove that. That's clear. So now let's just do the mathematics. Most people don't have good midas. All people are supposed to have children. A not good relationship with your child is going to destroy his emotional health. So the system is rigged that all society is supposed to have basically mostly non-emotionally healthy children. I don't know if you agree with me that it's a question, but it bothers me. And I believe the answer is, and I found a raya from Reb Shlomo Zalman, as I'll explain. I think the answer is very simple. Of course, we have midas problems, and with our friends and neighbors, we have to deal with those midas. But children, HaKadosh Baruch Hu forced upon us, ki'ilu, right? He gave us an obligation to have children. So he has to help us. HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave the ahava of a parent to a child. And we know that Chazal say, ahava mitkalkeles es hashu. I'll explain what I mean. First of all, there's a natural ahava between a father, a mother, and a child. It's an ahava tivis. The lashon of the Ramban is ein ahava gedola mi avas ha'av laben. The Ohr HaChaim HaKadosh says there is no bigger love than the love of a father to his child. So the ahava is what Hashem gave us. We know ahava mekalkelas es Shuir. The power of ahava is to make things that normally would be this way. Mikoyach ha'ava, it's mikalkeles. It destroys, it ruins the way, and people do different things. Mitoich av. HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave every single one of us the koyach of av. We'll talk about it in a minute, what the problem is with this. But now I'm just talking philosophically for a minute. The koyach of av that a father has to a child, that ability makes him be able to overcome his midos rois at home, even though outside he can't. Outside he still has to learn Muslim. But in your own home, with your own children, on the one hand it seems so hard, on the other hand, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us all the antidote. He gave us the power of Ava, that the Medrash says, Ein ha'em yechola lodun es bina. A mother cannot judge her own child because Ava mekalkelas es Shuir. The love that the mother has for her child doesn't allow for her to judge the child badly. With this, I'd like to explain a very interesting Reb Chaim Vital that always, I could say, bothered me a little bit. Reb Chaim Vital says, we all have a chayva, we all have an obligation to be metakin our midas, to become better people. When you go to the Beis Din Shel Mala, where are they going to judge if you yourself are a good person or not? Regardless of your actions, are you a good person? Says Reb Chaim Vital, the way you acted at home with your wife and children. The way you act at home with your wife and children, that is where the Rebbeinu Shalom will damn the person on the Yom Hadin on what his midos are. Now, on the one hand, I always thought, until a few days ago, I always thought that that's a big chumrah. Because at home, on the one hand, there's the nisayan of no one knows what you're doing, right? We all know that. We have our image to keep. We have our name to keep on the outside rather than the inside. We know that there are monsters at home, the really nice people outside. We know of them. So then it's a big chumrah to say that we judge you only in your own home. But after I thought of this answer, that no, it's a big kula. If outside you're a bad person, but at home you're a good person, because you have the koyach of ava to overcome your midas rois, because the ava that we have as parents to our children. Hashem says, I'm going to judge you with ava. And you know why? Because the chiyuv of midas is to emulate Hashem. And Hashem loves us with his midas. And therefore he judges us where he gives us the most love to our children. And he gives us the most power to be Aymed bin Isayan with our children. This power of love, we have to understand, is Yesod number one of parenthood. Rav Shlomo Zalman says, and with this I'll bring out the point and the problem that we all have. Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach says, I think someone asked him, we find Mishlei full of psukim about giving musar and teichacha to your children. Someone asked Rav Shlomo Zalman, or he asked the question himself, but we know that too much criticism is bad for the child. So why does Shlomo HaMelech talk about criticism so much? Said Rav Shlomo Zalman, and listen carefully. Said Rav Shlomo Zalman, that it used to be that the ava that a parent had for a child made him incapable of seeing his child doing any wrong. And to those parents, Shlomo HaMelech spoke and said, be careful. The ava cannot allow you not to see their wrongs. But today that we have no problem seeing their wrongs, we have to work on our ava. I'm not going to go into that today, but that's just point number one. Point number one of parenting. And it's the power that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us, whether you have seichel, whether you have midas tevis, the power of ava that doesn't let you see no wrong and needs musar to make you see wrong, that power of ava can overcome all obstacles that come in your way, from step one to whatever step the Rabbani Shalom has in store for you. However, okay, so we'll work on Ava, let's say. Let's say we even have the Ava. I want to go back to taking the focus off of us as parents, as mechanchim, and understanding that chinuch has two parts. The mechanech, the parent, and the chanich, the child. What I'm going to try to do over the next few minutes is going to be really some kind of a mental exercise. We have to change our focus of looking at what we are doing as parents, as mechanech. Our focus many times is all on what we are doing. There's something that is at least side by side and probably comes before. And that is what does my child need? What are the needs of my child? Now, when I ask this question, I'm sure many of you like, well, of course, I know the needs of my child. So I want to slowly change our perception of describing needs. I want to start with a story I once heard. A family moved from country to country. An Israeli family moved to Mexico. When they came here, the nice neighbors and friends said, listen, you just came in. Let's help you over the next few days with meals. And I'm sure a lady gets a phone call and says, would you like to help this family? Sure, the Simcha Rabba. You know what? I'm going to try to do this mitzvah the best. It says, what am I going to do? I'm going to make them imagine what is the best meal I would like for me and my family. And I'm going to, I'm going to go and give that meal to that family. The delicious meal came to the family, but it was all Mexican food. The kids just got off the plane, Israeli kids. The lady tried her best, but the family went out probably and bought some pasta and put up some pasta and ketchup. That lady meant well, without a suffix. She thought of Ahavta l'reacha kamocha. But this is where we have to learn what Chazal teach us and what the definition of chesed is. The definition of chesed, the pasuk is learned from a pasuk that says, Asher yechsar loy. What the other person is missing is my obligation to fulfill. So now that lady, that good, great lady with great intentions, tried to be Makayim, v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. She did what she would want for herself, and she did it with the best, with her whole heart. However, it was not asher yechsar loy. It was not that the family needed. So the family had no supper. We as parents, many times, have to first of all know, what are my child's needs? And that doesn't mean what does my child need? What would I need if I were him? Now, this is a general rule in human relations. This isn't just for children. This is a definition in the Torah of chesed. Chesed is, first I have to know what are the needs of the other person. We'll get back to chinuch in a minute. Let's just go over to the idea of understanding that we got to get out of our own box. And we have to learn how to define needs according to what the other person needs. Now, this may sound simple or may sound strange. So I want to just show you the Torah's perspective on other people's needs and how sometimes for us, that would really be out of our box. We would have a problem with it. The first example where the Gemara learns, Asher Yechsar Loi, the Gemara says a halacha. Listen to this halacha. I'll make the halacha practical. You have a very, very wealthy family in the city. Very wealthy family. That they drive around wherever they drive around in that, whatever they call those cars, SUVs. And they have with protection, right? They have a guard. And all of a sudden, they lost their pants. They lost all their money. And now we have to collect tzedakah for the family. Their mamish, they need tzedakah. Says the halacha, under certain circumstances, I'm not going to get into the halacha details, but it's clear that the halacha is that we go and we have to buy him an SUV and pay for his bodyguard to continue going with him, even though he doesn't have his money. So just to make it clear, it could be it's talking about before it became famous that he lost all of his money. But let's get out of the details. Bottom line is that I'm living in a city with hundreds of families who can barely make Shabbos. Then I have this guy who I have to buy him an SUV from the same exact kupas tzedakah. I can collect money for both equally. It's tzedakah. Of course, there's Hilchas Kedima in tzedakah, who gets first, but many times he can get first. Now, for many of us, I want that to be your introduction to twisted parenting. This, I would call, to many of you, would be twisted tzedakah. Why? Well, who asked him to live that lifestyle? And let me tell you even the bigger chiddush. If he used to go only on a private plane, it could be we have to pay him if he has to fly for a private plane. Could be. It depends on the circumstance. Who asked him? Who asked him to make himself into such a lifestyle? Good question. You're right. It's terrible. It could be it was terrible. And it could be you as a Rav in the shul. You used to give mussar to other people that that's not the right way to live. However, today that same Rav has to go collect money for that person, for that lifestyle, if that's defined as his need. I want us to start understanding and just realizing from the Torah that the Torah looks at another person's needs, sometimes regardless of how they were created and how they came about. But if today it's a need, he needs it. It could be we'll argue with him about lifestyles. But at the end of the day, it's a need for him right now. The Torah says, understand his need, whether you like it or not. And the mitzvah of chesed is to give him his need. Now let's go back to our children for a minute. We have to know that there are physical needs. We have to know what they need. And on that, we all feel quite comfortable that we're doing. We give them food, we give them clothing, we give them schooling, we give them vacations, we give them everything we think, anything that we can, we try to give them. But we have to know that there are emotional needs. And this also I want to expound a little bit in Chazal. We don't have to come on to anything more than stories in Chazal to see how the Torah related to a person's emotional needs. First, let's go back to the story of that rich guy who lost his money. What does it mean? What does it mean that he needs to continue going around in his Cadillac? Where's the need? Where's the physical need? To get to shul, to get to work, he can go in a Honda. The need is clearly an emotional need. He has an emotional need, and not giving him that will break him. And it's an emotional need that he created for himself. He lived a lavish lifestyle. And now he's going to feel not mechubed. And we're all sitting there and thinking, well, what kind of not mechubed? I'm not mechubed myself. You'll be mechubed like me. What's this? There's nothing not mechubed about driving around in a nice new Toyota Camry. Why do you got to drive around in your BMW? And many people wouldn't understand why they have to give from their own kaspe meiser to buy that person his BMW. But that's the way the Torah looks at it, rabbis. He needs it. We have to internalize this in all human relations, but more so at home. Because at home, it really gets complicated. I'm going to explain to you what I mean. As Fruma Yidden, as religious Jews, we have a mitzvah of chinuch. And of course, in the early years of the child, it's our responsibility to teach him right from wrong, and many times to mold his needs by us prioritizing certain things, just like that rich person. He got himself used to living a certain lifestyle. He made certain things important to him, whether it's correct or not, but that made him need that. Us as parents, when the children are young, for sure, our achrayus is to learn how to make them prioritize the right things. And therefore, we see our responsibilities sort of as to mold his needs. And that might be true. And for that, there are many, many, many chinuch classes on how to mold his needs. But I want to talk about two different ages of life. One is when the children are older, in their teens or later teens, or even older than that, when their needs were molded. They have their needs, whether right or wrong. What do we do? Number two is even when they're younger, there are needs that they have for whatever reason. And many times us as parents don't recognize those needs. Now here I have to be a very quick disclaimer. When I'm saying recognize needs, I am not saying giving them everything they need. Absolutely not. And we have to clearly differentiate between need and want. Not everything do they want, do they need, right? I'm not going to go on right now to define every one of those, but in general, we have to know. Again, I'm talking here conceptual, that there are needs. Children have needs. And our achrayus as parents is to address those needs. They have to be addressed. We see Chazal address a person's emotional needs. I'm going to give another quick example. An unbelievable thing I saw from Rabbi Matisyahu Solomon, should have a refuah shalema. He says that there's a halacha. If you buy an eved, you buy a slave, you have to treat him right. It says if you have two pillows at home, you can't sleep on two pillows and have him sleep on none. You take one, you give him one. Okay, what happens if there's only one pillow? Yerushalmi says you have to give the pillow to the eved. Says Rav Matisyahu Solomon, why? Because the eved, if he goes to sleep without a pillow, you know what he's going to feel? He's going to feel that, you know why I'm without a pillow? Because I'm an eved, I'm a nothing, I'm worthless. I'm going to I sleep without a pillow. He feels he's on a different level. In order for him not to feel that way, I have to sleep without a pillow. Not going to be comfortable. I'm also not going to be comfortable. But you're going to be physically uncomfortable. He's going to be emotionally uncomfortable. Give him that pillow. Next week, I'm going to talk about a question: what happens at home in certain similar situations? But now I just want to talk about the idea of, here we see that the halacha is defined by people's emotional needs. Our children have needs, emotional needs. They have to be addressed. I found it fascinating over the last few days. I was just looking into this a little bit in Chazal. And I found another fascinating halach. It's all relevant to us in a few days. And actually, with this, I want to answer a question, because some of you, it might be going through your mind, what emotional needs? This is all new stuff. So first of all, it's not so new. It's not so new. We'll see it's all over Chazal, emotional needs. But people do ask, and it does seem that in the last few years, the last few tens of years, there's a lot more emotional issues than there were before. I'd like to address that question maybe. Soon is coming up the 9 days, or for the Sfardim, it's the Shavua Shahalbo. That the halacha is you're not allowed to take a shower. We all know that most of us, many of us, do take showers, and we'll explain why. So there was a story. Listen to an interesting story. Some of you will like this story. It was a big, big Rav, a Nasi b'Yisrael. His name was Rabbi Gamliel. He's sitting and teaching Hilchas Avelus to his Talmidim, and he teaches them that when you're in Avel, the first day, you're in Avel, Avelus, you can't take a shower. Rabbi Gamliel's wife dies, and he goes and takes a shower. His Talmidim asked him, Rebbe, what's going on? Didn't you teach us that you're not supposed to take a shower in Avelus? He says, that's not relevant to me. I'm an istinus. An istinus, I'm a finicky person. I'm a finicky person. That halacha doesn't apply to me. Because you're finicky? I'm just going to give one opinion. What is a finicky person? A finicky person is that if he doesn't take a shower, he has no Yishuv Hadas. He can't function. If he doesn't take a shower, he can't function as a human being. It disturbs his Yishuv Hadas. There's something called Daita Yofe Olav, the Daita Ra Olav. His Das is nice on him or bad on him, good or bad. But istinus is a person, and listen, this is something extremely important, this idea. This is all of psychology. An istinus is a person that he does not have Yishuv Hadas if he doesn't take that shower. Therefore, Rabbi Gamliel said, I'm an istinus. Some people say it has to be such istinus that will bring him, that it'll make him sick. Now, obviously, in the door of Rabbi Gamliel, most of the people didn't have this problem. This was a specific problem that Rabbi Gamliel had. You want to need a makor for OCD, min haTorah. I went through the last few days the Chazalim on istinus. Istinus is OCD to whatever level it is. It could bring to chayli, it could bring to want to do suicide. It's mavur. An istinus is someone that modane things that other people doesn't bother. This person specifically, it bothers, and it bothers him to a point that he does not have yishuv hadas. What does the Torah do for such a person? If it's really disturbing your yishuv hadas, your emotional health, we change the halacha for you. You can take a shower. You can take a shower. An istinus who cannot stand the taste of maror doesn't have to eat maror. But you have to be very careful, say the poskim. Not everyone who says it bothers me is an istinus. It has to be that it's a real need. But istinus, if you go through the Chazal, you'll see that istinus is a person who he has that need. Now let's go home for a minute. Let's go back home. In the times of Rabbi Gamliel, or even in these times, in those families that everyone doesn't take a shower during the 9 days, and one child just can't function. What do we do as parents many times? Come on, that's it, that's the rule. We're not, with no showers, whatever it is, just for an example of a rule. What does the Torah say? The Torah, which is more important than the rules of your house, that child takes a shower, all the other children don't, because that's the needs of this specific child. That's what I mean when we have to take into account our children's specific emotional needs. Who's an istinus? And here's where I come to the answer of why there are so many emotional issues today. Because we're all taking showers today. Because we all paskin for ourselves that we're istinuses. And such a level, such a small level of lack of yishuv hadas really disturbs our whole yishuv hadas. So then, of course, there's going to be lots of emotional problems in a world that so many people are istinuses. But putting that aside, let's go back to practicality. We have to bring home this idea of realizing each individual child's needs. There's a story in a Yerushalmi of a very rich person who lost all his money. And they gave him to eat, and the dishes that he was eating from were kli cheres. I don't know how you say that. Kli cheres, clay. And he was so disgusted that he would eat and throw up. They brought the doctor. He's throwing up, he can't eat, what do we do? You know what the doctor did? The doctor became a psychologist as the Yerushalmi. The doctor told him, listen, I understand, you have a problem. When you see food in a clay bowl, you think it's disgusting, you think it's dirty. Come to the kitchen of the richest people in the city, your own home before you lost money. In the kitchen, everything is kli cheres. They just served it to you on a nicer plate. The guy calmed down and he was able to continue eating in kli cheres. I think that's the first psychologist that I found in the Yerushalmi, right? We dealt with his need. He was an istinus. he couldn't eat out of this. We have to deal with it. Each one of our children do have their individual needs. The sooner we notice them and deal with them, I'll elaborate more this in the third week. But this is the first thing that I want to get across. We have to stop programming our children. We have to stop defining their needs by what we think their needs are or what we want their needs to be. And we definitely need help on differentiating between what's a want and what's a need. But if it's a need, it has to be addressed, whether it has to be changed, worked on, ignored, and it'll go away with maturity. There are definitely all different kinds of eitzes when the children are young, what to do with this. But they need to be addressed. Now, in this light, I want to jump very far. Once we define that our responsibility as parents, even less as parents, responsibility to do chesed with someone else is to fulfill his needs, whether we understand them or not, if they're really a need. I'm going to jump to this whole idea of twisted parenting and all the interesting halachas that come up. What we are going to explain over the next week or two is going to be why these are needs of the children. These are their needs. And if these are the needs of the children, the chinuch didn't change. There's nothing twisted about this chinuch. Maybe we're twisting the parents into being parents. But a parent, the ava of a parent to a child, clearly has to bring him to want to fulfill his child's needs, if that's what he really needs. And of course, we'll get into the difference between what we think are mutter needs and usser needs, and how can something usser be defined as a need. I want to leave that, not for right now. I just want to understand that there's one underlining thing of chinuch. First, we have to define the needs of our children and try to address them and many times fulfill them. Only after that's defined can we go back to parenting and figuring out how to do it. But if we don't know what they need, we're going to be in trouble. Now, of course, it's not terrible, because we have to know that the society is that most people are not istanisses. What do I mean? Many times the system, the way the system is okay for many, many children, and it fulfills their needs. But we're finding that there are much, much more individual needs now. I'm not talking right now to schools, I'm talking to parents. Of course, in a school, they have to deal with maybe a certain boundaries of what needs they can address and what needs they can't address. But us as parents, there are no boundaries. We have to stop making our own homes into what we say the schools are doing, right? The Chazon Ish used to say that a yeshiva, a school, can be similar to the bed that was in Sdoim va'Amoira. There's a famous bed in Sdoim va'Amoira. They had one bed, or maybe more, for guests. If you wanted to be a guest in that city, there was a bed with a certain size. You went and lie down in that bed. If you were too long, they cut off your legs. If you were too short, they stretched your legs to fit it. Certain times we feel with schools but that's what they do. Because children have needs, and not always can the school address and fulfill those needs. That could be, I don't want to get into that right now. But us as parents, turning our own homes into institutions and making our own home a mitas sdoim, defining exactly what box our children have to fit in. I'm not really here. I just want to, being that I'm speaking to a Mexican group of people, I just want to bring up something, and I don't mean to make an issue about it. I just want to address something. Here we know that in Mexico, and it's also noyeg in other kehilas, by the Hasidic kehilas, it's noyeg a little bit also, that the parents have their children come over to their home on Shabbos for years after their marriage. It is basically an obligation. It's an obligation. Now, it could be it's the right thing for the kehillah and for the family growth. I'm not here to judge it. I just have one question. Did anyone ask themselves, is this good for my child or bad for my child, for his family? Where does that come in? I'm just giving you an example of how sometimes we are blind to asking ourselves a question on no matter what age the children are. Do they have their own needs? So of course, continue the minig. But if you would have this in mind also, that on the one hand, there is a need for the family and for the kehillah, there is a need for it to be this way. On the other hand, one of my children maybe have a need to be more at home. That's the way we should be mechanech our children. Sometimes shilas come to Rabbanim. Interesting shilas. There's different minhagim. Shavuos, Rosh Hashanah, the husband, the wife, who goes where. And over the years, questions come up. No, he wants to go to him, and it's a chutzpah. And it always, the issue is, so what do I do? And sometimes I want to ask, and sometimes I do ask, what's best for the child? Where's he going to have the nicer yom? Is that like, I mean, maybe there's a reason he doesn't want to come to your house, but let's leave that aside. And if there is a reason he doesn't want to come to your house, is forcing him to come to your house the solution, or dealing with the problem? Just an example, a simple example that is very relevant to most of us. That's why I brought that example. I did not mean that example to bring up any issue. I just brought that example up to something that, wow, never thought of that. What's best for the child and the family? Maybe that's where he should go for Yom Tif. Isn't that the definition of Asher Yechsar Loi? That's what he needs. So this is the first thing I wanted to do this week, is I wanted to present, first of all, the idea of the koyach of Ava that we have, the natural koyach of Ava that we have as parents, has the ability to overcome all the nisyonos that chinuch can bring. And that's the only reason HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us permission to be parents, is because together with that, he gave us Ava. And to that I want to address, but we don't have that Ava. That's true. So we have to work on it. Ava is something that's workable. And what's great about the Ava that we have to our children is that we all know we have it. We just have to make it larger, greater, more palpable, more there, more high, more alive. Because just about any one of us know that if our children needed a kidney, right? Like we say in English, it goes, I'd give him my right arm. We'd give anything for our children. We have what to build on. There is an Av. We have to build on that Ava. We have to work on that. With that koyach of Ava, we can come over all nisyonis of Chinuch. That's Yesod number one I wanted to share with you tonight. And Yesod number two is that before defining how I, as a parent, have to be machanach, I must also think, what does my child need? Most of his needs are within the general spectrum of needs, and most of the general chinuch will work for that. But what are his specific needs? What are his feelings? Maybe he's extra sensitive to something. We have to stop this idea, hu mishuga. It's just, he's just in a bad mood. Does it really bother him? Is he an istinus to a certain thing? Lots of Chazal were istinists. We can move on to Ruach Ra and depression, but I'm not going there. I'm just talking about an istinus. Everyone has their own needs. And certain things make them crazy. And we don't understand it. What's the problem? Yeah, Chazal understood it. And as parents, as an machanchim, and as rabbeim, and as all of us, we have to take care of his needs. And I'm going to end with one thing. This is something that makes some of us crazy. Let's go back to that rich person who lost all his money. When he lost all his money, he lost his house, and they took away his house and his tefillin also. They took away his tefillin. We got to go collect tzedakah. Big machlekes. Could we, from tzedakah, if we can buy him tefillin? That's his ruchniistic needs. Buy him a BMW, but don't buy him tefillin. As parents, let me tell you what Rabbi Yisrael Salanter said. Rabbi Yisrael Salanter said he still remembers when people used to worry about their friends' physical and gashmias needs and their own ruchniistic needs. He says already in his generation, he saw it turn around. Everyone is worried about the other person's ruchniistic needs and their own gashmiistic needs. When I'm talking about chesed over here, I'm talking about the child's physical, emotional needs. His ruchniistic needs are chinuch. We must be machanach. Chiyuv chinuch might be over at 13. At a certain age, we have to more worry about his pants and his dress than his tefillin. His tefillin is his problem. His pants and his dress is my chiyuv to fulfill his need of asher yechsa. That's the line of chinuch from zero to the end. At least let us be balei chesed with our children and try to fulfill their asher yechsa loy. Address their asher yechsa loy. Deal with their asher yechsa. That is the yesod of al-pi darkoi. Al-pi darkoi doesn't mean a kid going off the derech. Al-pi darkoi means each one of our children with all of their idiosyncrasies. How do we deal with it? We find in Chazal, many of these istinuses became Gedolei Yisrael. Their mental health remained healthy because they knew how to navigate the halachas of the Torah, when this way and when that way, according to Chazal Mamish. Let's go back to the start and remember that, yes, every single one of us, Be'ezras Hashem, has the power to bring Mashiach, to fulfill, to continue drying up the ocean that HaKadosh Baruch Hu asked us to dry up, and to take out all of the nitzotzos of Kedusha. And when we all have lots of nachas from our children in Mitzvah Hashem. And I'll continue Be'ezras Hashem next week, and I'll explain exactly who and what this idea of Avi Fishoff is, and I believe it's all in light of what we spoke this evening. Thank you.